Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Kevin Hancock, Director of Solutions here at Exostar. I'll be the host for a portion of today's webinar, and then I'll hand you over to my colleague, Joey Scarpulla. I am going to give a couple minutes for people who might be running a little late a chance to join up. So please bear with me, and we'll go ahead and get started at 2 minutes past the hour. Hello, everybody. For those of you who may have just joined us, my name is Kevin Hancock, Director of Solutions here at Exostar. Thanks for joining today, but I'm going to give 1 more minute for people who might be running a little late a chance to join up. So I appreciate your patience, and we'll go ahead and get started at 2 minutes past the hour. All right, everybody, let's go ahead and get started. So once again, my name is Kevin Hancock, Director of Solutions here at Exostar. And thanks for joining me today for our webinar, Prepare for 2025, Complete Your CMMC Self-Assessment and Secure Your DoD Future. I'm going to be joined today by my colleague, Joey Scarpulla. He's going to take us, I'm going to go through the first half of the session today, cover the rule, the latest updates there, and you decided to join in exciting times. And then when I switch over to the demonstration of our certification assistant application, Joey will take it from there and bring the webinar home. So today's session is scheduled to last 45 minutes to an hour. It does include a Q&A. You'll be muted during today's presentation, and we're going to use the questions that were submitted prior to today's session. You can submit questions via the chat feature, but we may not get to them during today's session. I apologize for that. If for some reason we do have an outage, just wait for a minute, try to reconnect. You can also use that link you received via email to try and reconnect at any time as well. If at any time you'd like to speak with one of our certification assistant experts, you can request a copy of this slide deck, or if you have really any questions about Exostar or our different solutions, you can reach out to us at cmmc-team@exostar.com. You can also go to our website, www.exostar.com. There's a chat feature there on every page, and we'd be more than happy to answer any questions you have via that channel as well. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So as I mentioned, I'm first going to cover what kind of the current state of the CMMC rulemaking process. Then we're going to talk about kind of what goes into creating that system security plan and how and the different information you're going to need to gather before you go into Exostar's certification assistant application itself. A lot of today's session will be a demonstration via Exostar Certification Assistant of how you go through and build that system security plan utilizing that application, gathering the information you need to populate and create that system that you're going to be actually assessing against. Review the output of Certification Assistant, which is that system security plan, as well as the score that you need to enter into the SPRS system. And then any POA&Ms or things like that you may also create as you go through your self-assessment. As I mentioned, I'm going to cover kind of the first part of this, take you to the demonstration. I'll turn it over to Joey of my team to do the demonstration and take you home for the second half of today's session. So, reason I said exciting times when I started, so the final CMMC rule has been published in the Federal Registry. It actually published up just its official date is today, but last week there was an announcement that it was going to be published. This, if you will, is the output of when the draft rule was originally pushed out last December of 2023. This final rule takes into account all those comments that came in via that public comment period. Now, there is one additional component that we're still waiting to take effect before you'll start to see CMMC compliance requirements start to show up in your contracts. We're waiting for that 48 Code of Federal Regulations. That's the one that'll actually implement the CMMC rule. That's currently in a proposed rule state, and that was published back in August of 2024. Now, just a reminder, what this rule takes into effect is that move from a self-attestation to a third-party assessment model. Right? Up until today, or actually up until the CMMC rule takes effect, what we've been, if we receive controlled unclassified information as part of our contract with the Department of Defense, or because we're a subcontractor to somebody that has that contract, we've been required to safeguard that controlled unclassified information in accordance with NIST 800-171. In the past, we've been able to self-attest that we do those things. We then were required to score ourselves and do that self-assessment and enter that score into the SPRS system. And the next phase of that, if you will, safeguarding of controlled unclassified information is that we're going to move to a third-party assessment model that once every 3 years, we're going to need a C3PA organization, excuse me, a C3PAO, a certified third-party assessment organization, to come in and do an assessment of how we have implemented our, those 110 NIST 800-171 controls and validate that we do those things. The rule also has given some clarification of some different providers in this space and what they do. One of those are cloud service providers. If you utilize a cloud service to store, process, or transmit controlled unclassified information, and Exostar has a cloud service that does this, that's our Exostar Managed Microsoft 365 for CMMC. If you utilize something like that, that application needs to be a FedRAMP moderate or FedRAMP moderate equivalent solution. If you're utilizing a third party to help you in that process, store, transmit CUI, when the rule was first drafted, it said that those ESPs, which in often terms are what we call MSPs, managed service providers, it said that those organizations would also have to be CMMC certified. With this final rule in place, what it says is that they don't have to be CMMC certified, but their services are going to be assessed as part of your overall CMMC assessment. So those activities that they do, those individuals that may be part of your outsourced IT organization, et cetera, they'll have to satisfy all those NIST 800-171 controls within your overall system. Now, just a reminder, CMMC breaks this down into 3 different levels. And these 3 different levels will be obviously part of the DFARS clauses within your contract. If you're an organization that does not receive or create controlled unclassified information, you're classified as a level 1 organization. And there are 15 requirements that you're going to have to satisfy just that you do those things to secure the federal contract information, that FCI. That is still going to be an annual self-assessment and an annual affirmation that you still do those things. right? And the majority of the defense industrial base falls into this level. But if you are an organization that receives controlled unclassified information or creates it, you're going to fall into one of two categories. You're either going to be a level 2 self-assessment, or you're going to be a level 2 certification assessment. If you fall under that level 2 certification assistant, you're going to be required to engage with that third party to once every 3 years do an assessment of how you're fulfilling those controls. If you receive elevated controlled unclassified information, you'll fall under level 3. In those cases, you not only have to satisfy those NIST 800-171 controls, but there's also a number of controls from 800-172 that you also have to satisfy. Now, that's a small portion of the organization, right? That's less than 1% of the DIB. Now, as you go through that self-assessment, if you haven't complied with a particular control, you need to create what's called a POA&M, a plan of action and milestone. Right? We're all required today to do a self-assessment of our organizations, with those NIST 800-171 controls. And if we find one that we're not doing, we should open a POA&M, plan of action and milestones, make sure we know what we're supposed to address, assign that to somebody in our organization, and track that to closure. Now, if you have a POA&M, you're supposed to close that POA&M within 180 days. Now, if you've engaged with that third-party assessor and they come out and they do your assessment, they can okay you in a provisional status if you've got 80% of those NIST 800-171 controls, as long as those controls aren't the ones that are considered high or critical. And then there's a few others. But if you've got those under POA&M, those ones that are allowable, and you'll see those ones that are allowable in a minute. And it's not that many. You'll be able to open that POA&M and you'll have to close it within 180 days. Now, when CMMC takes effect, it's going to be implemented over time. And as you see here in the implementation phases, and these are spelled out in the final rule that just came down, this is phased in over 3 years. Phase 1 is the initial year of the program. So it's going to last for 12 months. It's after the effective date, and that effective date isn't today, right? The final rule just got put into place, but there's still the second rule that's attached to it that's coming. That's when it will be implemented. So from that point, for that first 12 months, level 1 and level 2 will typically require a self-assessment, but DoD may choose to include level 3 C3PO assessment requirements in some contracts. It'll be all new solicitations, but they may include it in some. Phase 2, right, 1 year following that effective date. So, 1 year after that gets done, that's when you'll start to see that level 3 will take effect, and you'll start to see level 2 C3PO assessment requirements in applicable DoD solicitations. So you'll start to see more and more come into effect with that third-party assessment. Phase 3, so 2 years after that initial year, right? Or after that effective date, level 2 C3PO assessment will start to be in those option years. And the DoD can start to put in those requirements into existing contracts. And then obviously phase 4 starts the whole, the overall, and that'll be 3 years following the effective date. So over that time, you'll start to see these things be required in the contracts. And you should expect that when you bid on a contract, you'll have to meet these requirements. Now, that doesn't change what we have to do today because these clauses already appear in your contracts, right? So if you've got DFARS clauses 7012, what that contract clause said is that if you receive controlled unclassified information, you have to protect it while you're storing, transmitting, or processing that information by following NIST 800-171. That's those 110 controls that you have to follow. Now, if your contract includes the 7019 clauses, that requires you to do a self-assessment and score yourself on how you're doing against those controls. That assessment guide is the 171A, right? That's the assessment guide for NIST 800-171. And that lays out a scoring methodology. So for every control you've implemented, you get a point. For every control you haven't implemented, it's either a -1, a -3, or a -5. So your SPRS, your score that you need to enter into the SPRS system can range from -203, I think it is, to 110. And what it also requires you to do is take that score and enter it into that supplier performance risk system. Sorry about that, folks. Choking a little bit. Now, as you get ready to do that self-assessment, and as you start to build out your system security plan, and as you start to think about whether or not you need something like Exostar's certification assistant to help you out there, you should start to think about, well, how do I figure out what actually I'm supposed to assess? And what we recommend is that you follow the CUI in your organization to determine, kind of how it enters in, right? Where do I receive CUI from? Is it going to be from the DoD itself? Is it coming to me from a third party because I'm a subcontractor? Or am I creating it because I'm receiving information from the DoD, but then I'm speccing it, I'm building something, I'm giving diagrams, etc. So I may also be creating CUI. Where do I store, process, and transmit it? What systems do that? What people in my organization are involved in that? And those people and systems aren't only the individuals, that are on the shop floor or delivering the service. It may also be your IT organization or the MSP that you've engaged to manage your IT organization, because they also, because of their different kinds of accounts and things like that, they may also have access to those. Maybe these are physical systems, right? Maybe you're taking a drawing and putting it into a file cabinet. Maybe you're receiving specs, printing them out, putting it in a file cabinet, etc. So it's not only your IT systems, it can also be those physical systems that also are part of that. As you follow that data, go ahead and build out a diagram, a network diagram of your current setup. Take into account all those systems, those devices, those physical file cabinets, etc., that store, process, or transmit CUI. As part of any corporate network, we're going to have things that they don't necessarily store, process, or transmit CUI, but they protect it, right? These are like firewalls. These are locked doors. These are physical devices where your users might be, like if you have a CAT card or a hardware token that gates your access into a system. Those things all are those security protection assets. We already talked about if we're utilizing an MSP, those are those contractor risk manage assets. Maybe you have an MSP that manages your firewalls, configures them, etc. Maybe you have somebody that manages your network, etc. Again, they don't store it, but they're there to protect that information. You may have specialized assets like your machinery on your floor, a 3D printer, a regular printer, etc. That not necessarily in scope, but need to be accounted for, and you need to understand that how that interacts with controlled unclassified information. And then obviously you should have some stuff that's just not in scope. It might be people, right? There might be people in your organization that aren't involved in this flow at all. We might have a separate facility or separate areas where this kind of activity doesn't take place, etc. Those should be marked and noted, but they're not part of the overall system. Because remember, it's up to you to tell that C3PAO when they come on site, look, this is the systems and the individuals that make up where I store, process, and transmit CUI. Now, as you go through these controls, right, there's 14 control families, and spread across these control families, there's 110 individual control items. And within each of those 110 controls, there are what are called determine if statements. Determine if they do this, determine if they do that. And in each of these categories, you're going to be able to, you have a policy, you have procedures and implementation statements of how you do that. You need to have evidence of how you actually implement that control. And you'll have to have people, if that's part of the control, that have actually done that, how they configured it, etc. And these are the things that third-party assessment organization is going to take into account. And it's this kind of thing that Exostar Certification Assistant allows you to do within the application. Gather that information all in one place and then share it out or run an overall CMMC program. And this is what a control looks like, right? There's an overarching family. There's each of those individual controls that are part of it. And in each of these, you're going to need that, what part of my network, what part of my system does these things? How do I support that individual control? Who in my organization does these kinds of things? And how often do I review this? Make sure it's still active, make sure I haven't changed any technology, etc. And so that's why when we talk about CMMC and NIST 800-171, it is about managing an overall program. This isn't just a one-time assessment, do it and forget about it. It's manage that overall program. And for that, we obviously recommend Exostar Certification Assistant to help you manage that overall program. Now, as you go through this assessment, as I mentioned, each control is worth 1, 3, or 5 points. Your score is going to range somewhere between a -203 to 110. If you haven't implemented a particular control, you got to create that plan of actions and milestones. If you're in the assessment process, you should always, when you're doing your assessment, you should create a POA&M for any control you haven't implemented. If the third party is doing their assessment, they're going to give you a conditional pass as long as you have 80% of the controls completed, and those are only those that are worth 1 point. Now, if you meet that, that's assessment organization is going to be okay, and they're going to give you 180 days to close those. And this is kind of that scoring mechanism, right? So as I mentioned, these are all the controls that are worth 5 points. These are all the controls that are worth 3 points. If they're not part of these, then they're worth 1 point. And there are certain controls here, right? These are the ones that are worth 1 point, but you can't have these open when that assessor comes in. If you do have POA&Ms, then that assessor again can pass you, but it will be a conditional pass. You'll then have 180 days to close that out. You'll have that same assessment organization come out, verify that you've closed it. They'll look for that evidence. They'll look for, a person that's done that for you and see if they actually understand how they implement it and all those kinds of things. And then if they do that, then they'll give you the certification assist. They'll give you the certificate that says, hey, you've passed this, and it'll be good for 3 years. So I'm going to pass this over to Joey now to show you how you can automate this process, how you can use Certification Assistant itself to help you manage this overall process and run your overall CMMC program. So let me stop sharing. And Joey, I'll send it over to you.
Thanks, Kevin. Hopefully you can see my screen here.
We can.
Great. So to get into Certification Assistant, normally you log into Exostar. There's a couple tabs, My Application, Open Applications. You just click on Exostar Certification Assistant, click on Launch, and that will actually kickstart your trial here. Once you get into the Certification Assistant standard here, you'll see your dashboard. And on your dashboard, it does have a few details here. One, it's going to give you a quick graph on how many controls you have implemented and not implemented. Within this page as well, you'll see what your current score is, right? Here's my DoD assessment score. It's 43. And this gets calculated every time you mark a control as implemented. Also, it will also calculate when's the last date you plan on completing that last POA&M on. So here I have POA&Ms out there, but my last one that I plan to complete it on will be at the end of or in 2026. So to get into this tool, we just click on here to get started. This will bring us into this second page level here. The first thing you might want to do is go to the System Security Plan Builder. Within this builder here, this is where you start putting information about your enclave. You have your system description. You might put in what your cage code is, your address. You go into stakeholders. This is going to be all the personnel who's involved for approving this SSP plan. You have your information owner, your system security officer. You have your system environment. This is going to be your diagram and your hardware and software information about your enclave. You can create your diagram. You can upload it. You'll have your diagram pictures here. You'll also have your hardware and software information. Now, this hardware and software can be modified in line, right? So if I wanted to, I could add hardware, add a new line. I can actually modify an existing line. Just click on here. Say I want to reallocate this laptop to someone else. I can just come in here and I'm reallocating to John Smith. Click on save. And now I just updated this line item and reallocated this laptop. Now, of course, what I can do is also download a template of this, which will give me all the headings for this. I can add all the hardware offline, modify it all out there, and then upload it back into here, and it'll populate this list online for you. If you do purchase our Managed Microsoft 365, which is our technology piece here, it is a SaaS application, which means it would go under software. So you'd put your information here for that tool as well. Next section here is policies. Policies are going to be the policies that you might need to link to specific controls of how you are doing that specific control. Certification itself doesn't create the policies. You can upload the policies. We have another tool called Policy Pro, which is another SaaS application that helps you create the policies as well as assess how well written those policies are. I'll get into more information later on that. Once you have your policies, either you create it with Policy Pro or you create them on your own, you can upload those policies here. You'll see a list of all the policies you have uploaded. Once you start attaching those policies to specific controls, you'll see which controls that those policies are linked to. So let's get into an assessment here. We'll click on self-assessment. Here, you're going to see the list of the 14 families that contain all the 110 controls. A quick view on all these families here. You'll see for each one how many controls you have implemented or not implemented. A quick view on these information. If you see the triangle with the exclamation point, that means you have some controls with open POA&Ms. If I wanted to, I could do a quick print self-assessment. It will show me how all the controls, if they're marked as implemented or not implemented, as well as if I want to see a list of all my open POA&Ms or a list of all the action items. Wonder if this will show you right here if I wanted to do that. It does open up a different window here. We'll get back to that. All right, so let's get into a specific family. We'll get into identification and authentication. Click on that. This will drill into this specific family. Again, you'll see the list of controls for that family, their statements, as well as which ones are marked as implemented or not implemented, which ones may have an implementation statement, which ones may have policies linked, artifacts linked, any POA&Ms, or even workflows. So let's drill down even deeper into a specific control. We'll click on this 357, which is enforced minimum password complexity. Click on this. That will take us into this specific control. And now within the control, we have a lot of information here to help you satisfy the control. We'll start with the control guidance, right? It's going to give you information on what to examine, who to interview. We have another tab here called additional info. This is going to give you more information, where to look, who to talk to, right? As well as all these determinatives. Now, determinatives are the objectives that need to be completed for every single control, right? So there are 320 objectives within the 110 controls. When an auditor does come in, they're actually going to go through every determinative or every objective. They're going to say, okay, do you have your password complexity requirements defined? Do you have your password change of character requirements defined? So they're going to go through each one of these, and so we're giving you guidance here to make sure you have all these requirements enabled, right? Did you do that? Did you determine if you did that? Make sure you do all these, right? The first tab here is your implementation statement. This is where you go to put your implementation statement. You type in all your information here. Your policy references. This is where you go to attach a specific policy to this control. As I mentioned before, you can use Policy Pro to help you create those policies. You come to Certification Assistant to upload those policies. You'll see a list of all the policies you have uploaded to Certification Assistant, and now you just have to attach which one is referencing for this control. So say I'm saying this password policy I created is for this control. I can select that and now attach this password policy to this control. You'll now see the policy attached here. Now, if I want to verify that this is the correct policy, I can right click on here, open a new tab, and now I can actually see the password policy and review that this is the correct policy I want to attach to this control. Next tab here is artifact upload. Artifact upload is just saying the evidence to satisfy this control. You're going to have a bunch of controls that might have different things that you need to show evidence of. You might have some controls that you need to just upload logs every once a month. You might have might just be like a snapshot of a particular policy. Here I did upload a password group policy. So say for instance, I needed to enable, I have my policy says I have to have 10 passwords remembered. I need password complexity enabled. And I did that in my group policy. I can now take a snapshot of that and upload that. So just to verify, I can right click new tab, and here is a snapshot of my group policy, right? I'm showing that I do have password history enabled, 10 passwords remembered. I do have my me complexity requirements enabled. So I'm showing evidence here. Now keep in mind, some things may not be enough, right? An auditor might come in and say, okay, I see your snapshot here, but actually show me the actual evidence in that group policy that those things are enabled, and not that this is just an old picture or something. So there are some things they want you to specifically verify. Action items. Action items, this is where you go to create a POA&M or an action item. But we're going to skip that for this particular control. We'll work on an action item on a different control. We're just going to work through this control as we're completing it and marking as implemented. So I have no action items for this control. The last tab here is workflow tasks. Now, workflow tasks is more like reminders on making sure this control is still in effect. So keep in mind, an SSP plan is not a one and done type thing. It's like a living, breathing document. You do need to constantly upload documents. You need to show evidence, log files, or whatever you need to do to keep in sync. So here I'm going to say, I want to verify that my password policy is still in sync with my group policy. So verify password policy in sync with group policy. I want to test that once a quarter, right? I can do daily, weekly, monthly, whatever I want. I'm going to do once a quarter. I'm going to assign it to Joey, and I'm going to click on save. So what happens now is I just created a workflow task, and I'm going to get constant reminders once a quarter that I need to verify that my password policy and my group policy is still in sync. In other words, I'm going to look at my group my password policy. It's going to say I have 10 passwords remembered. I have complex requirements or complexity requirements defined. And then I'm going to go into my group policy and make sure that that is still implemented, because you never know. You might have some IT guy that goes in there, changes it. Oh, I don't want 10 passwords remembered. I want only 5. So he changes it to 5. Now there's a mismatch between what your policy says and what you actually have implemented. Now, say, for instance, an auditor now comes in and says, okay, I see you have your password policy that says you have 10 passwords remembered. Show me that in your group policy. You go to the actual group policy and it says 5. Like, oh, this is a mismatch. This is not right. I'm gonna fail you on this. Once you're failed on that, then you have to now re-engage with an order at a different time. They're not going to allow you at that particular moment to go back. Oh, let me change that to the 10 real quick. You can't make those changes on the fly like that. They won't allow that. So that's why you have to make sure that you are doing these reminders to make sure you're still in sync with specific controls that you're working with. All right. Once I have my workflow, my implementation statement, all my determinants enabled as yes, I have my policy references, all this stuff is done. I can now mark this control as implemented. I can now click on save. And so what happens now is this is going to immediately update my self-assessment score on that main page. Originally, it was set to 43. I can now go to that main page here, and you'll see that this control was actually only worth 1 point. So I now should go from 43 to 44. And here is the new updated score as 44. All right. So next thing I want to show you is actually creating a POA&M or an action item. So say I have a control that I can't really do right now, right? We'll go to awareness and training. I'll click on this. And I will go to control 3.2.3, which means provide security awareness training. Click on this. Now I'm in this specific control. I do have, an implementation statement here, but I do still need to actually do the actual training in place, right? I have to have a procedure, or I have to have something like Know Before Me, or something, a tool that will help me do the security training awareness once a year, right? So I can't do that right now. So I'm going to create an action item. I'm going to say create training program. I'm going to assign it to Joey. I want this completed by the end of the month. I click on save, and now I just created a POA&M or an action item. I set it to Joey. Now he has the action item to now go off and figure out, what security training awareness program are we going to use? Are we going to purchase a tool? Am I going to create a spreadsheet of questions that now I have to provide to all my employees to make sure they're going through this training and making sure they know how to work and be secure for CUI documents. Once I mark that as an action item, you'll actually see a new bubble here, orange, saying pending action items. And now this particular control, when I do reports on action items, will be part of that action items list. So that's how I create an action item. All right, we have other tabs here. One's called risk management. I can actually create risks through here. And I can just start by clicking on add risk. I could specify, like, say, email is a risk item. I can add that to list and say how, if it's high or low of likelihood I might get CY there, and if I have any mitigations through that. You know, I can just walk through the steps. It's going to walk through all these steps here, determining what kind of a risk it is, and then it's going to populate that on a bubble up here on your likelihood if it's a risk or not. The next tab here is approval. This is where you go if you want to get signed off. You have your information owner. They can come here, log in, and sign off on this SSP plan saying, yes, I approve it. And you have other signatures. Let's say you have one of your users that are not part of the system, but your system security officer, he doesn't have access to the system. You can actually print out the document and say he signed it offline. That way you just, you know, say he signed it offline and mark that as approved within this document here. Last tab here is the SSP/POA&M reports. This is where I would go to create my reports, right? I could add a logo, where I have the ability to add a logo to my SSP plan, but you do want to generate your SSP plan every time you might make some changes. That way you can have a list of archived reports, right? I can come down here and see, you know, how I've been doing. If my reports are getting better or worse, I can check to see the differences between one and the other. And you'll see when's your latest time you have generated by who and so forth. So right now, the last time I generated a report was back in August. My score was a 42. Right now I have a better score, so I'm going to regenerate this SSP plan here. I'll click my SSP plan. I'll click on generate. And now it's going to generate a new report. This should now get updated. I should have like a score of 44. And the date should be today. There it is. It's now been updated. And now I can actually view this SSP plan. So let me click on this. I'm going to have to share this other item now. Okay. This is the SSP plan. We put everything together in this SSP plan. It has all the information, it has links, it has all the information you need. So if you really wanted to during an audit, you can actually pull up this plan and go through it step by step. You can show them your system identification information up top. You can show them your system environment. If I wanted to, I could click on this. It's going to load up that diagram. You're going to have your hardware and software that's part of scope. And then each control, if they're marked as implemented or not implemented, you can have, you know, any artifacts you might have uploaded, any policies you have linked. It can also be clickable and uploaded or opened, as well as, you know, your implementation statements will be listed here as well. So everything that you require for an audit is here, or if you needed to print this page out, you can do so as well. Another page I want to show you is the POA&Ms report, right back to here. So now I want to, you know, view the list of POA&Ms. I can click on this. Again, this is going to open up another page here. Let me go there. Okay. Now here is the list of all the POA&Ms I have still open out there, right? It's going to give you the name of the POA&M, the action item. You might have put your description here. Who is it assigned to, you know, when the start date and when your due date was, right? So you can easily see I have 13 POA&Ms out there that still need to be closed out, you know, who they're assigned to and what the status is at that point. And the last thing I'll show you on this page would be this view DOD, right? View DOD is just a quick, more of a description type thing of how to enter that information on, here, I gotta share this one, hold on. View DOD is just a quick basic DOD assessment number that you can use to put into the SPRS, the SPRS score. I mean, the SPRS system, right? It's going to show you, hey, you know, you're 44 out of 110. This is what your cage code is. And here's that PAE landing page that you should go to enter your SPRS score, right? You go in there, and then you can enter your score there. You're not uploading the whole SSP plan there. All you're uploading is the score that you've created from your self-assessment here. All right, back to certification assistant main page. And the same thing with CMMC 2.0. Once that comes out, then all you're going to have is just SSP plan and POA&Ms. You're not going to really need to enter the score into the SPRS system anymore, because now it's just a pass or fail type thing. You have to be at 110 once the audit is complete to be certified here. Other things I'll show you here is you can work with a partner, right? If I click on my name here, there's a few things I can do. You know, if I'm in a trial version, I could upgrade the plan to standard, or if I'm in light version, I could upgrade my plan. Partner engagement. This allows me to work with external partners to help me walk through the SSP plan. So say I want to work with a partner, I can click on this. We have a bunch of partners you can work with. I can select which I want to start a partner request. I click on that. I can now say I want to be a CMC level 2. I want a readiness assessment, and say I want to work with one of these partners, and now I can click on send request. When I do that, this partner is now going to receive a request that you want a partner engagement with them. They can either accept or deny your request. If they accept it, then you'll go into a partner agreement, and then from there, they might give you a service fee of how much they require to do an engagement with you. And within the engagement, they actually would walk through. They can actually take control of your client. They have their own portal. They can log into your client here and actually walk through all the controls for you. They may have conversations with you on the phone, ask you about what your CUI flow is. They'll create the implementation statements for you. They'll ask you, if you have any policies in house, or review those policies. They'll help attach those policies to the controls and work through all the controls, and then create the SSP plan for you and show you what your current score is, as well as any open POA&Ms they might create, and then give you guidance of how to close out those POA&Ms. From there, they might even provide additional services if you needed their help to close out those POA&Ms, and be your MSP for that as well. Once you close out all those POA&Ms, you should be at 110, and then you'd be compliant there. All right. Certification assistant is one of the tools out of many. Let me open up this PowerPoint slide back. All right. Certification assistant is the tool that helps you create the SSP plan. You could put in your network diagram. You could create plan of actions and milestones. You could upload policies and procedures, attach them to specific controls. You could have whoever's part of that org has access to that certification assistant. So it's not a limited number of users. Anyone who's part of your org can get into the system. You have the ability to upload the list of assets you might have into this environment that's part of the enclave. And you have that workflow where you do those reviews and so forth. Now, the certification assistant is part of what we call our CMMC Ready Suite. Our CMMC Ready Suite is a number of tools put together that will help you be compliant. Certification assistant tool, again, is the tool that's going to help you create the SSP plan, but it doesn't create the policies for you. We have another SaaS application called Policy Pro. This tool actually helps you create the policies. There's two main features for Policy Pro. There's one that is a policy builder, and there's a policy assessment. The policy builder has a template for every single control that you have there. All you have to do is modify based on your organization. So say, for instance, I started with control 3.1.1. There'll be a template there, has all the verbiage there, and it might have like a little space for your account creation. 3.1 is account creation. It's going to say what's your turnaround time if someone wanted to create an account in your system. All you do is put in the number within the space that it has. You can say it's 48 hours. You update that, and now you worked off this template, and now you created a policy from that. The next piece of Policy Pro is the assessment of the policy. I can now take that policy, move it into the assessment piece, and now it's going to score on how well written that policy is. It's going to give you what we call our Kenny system key elements not included. It's going to say, hey, you're missing the word FIPS in control 3.1.18. And now if you go in that specific control, in that policy, you add the word FIPS and the verbiage around that. You can go back, reassess it. It's going to say, oh, you have a better score here. And now you have a well-rounded policy. The score is not an academic score. It's like anything over like a 50% is a well-written document. But of course, we give you guidance of how to make it better. I don't know if you ever achieve 100% because, not every organization is different. They may have keywords that you don't need, right? Say you don't have work from home, you might take that whole section out. So a bunch of things you can do there. But the important thing here is it can assess the policy. It can help you help you build the policy, assess the policy, and now you have a good, well-written policy. You export out of Policy Pro. You import it into Certification Assistant, and that's when you go back and you start attaching those policies to specific controls that they might be referencing. These two SaaS applications are more the document piece where you create your SSP plan, your policies. But then we have another piece called the Manage Microsoft 365. All right, so now you have all these controls. It's saying you need to protect the CUI document. You need, how do I protect the CUI? We have what we call the Manage Microsoft 365 solution. What this does is this gives you a place to store, manage, collaborate that CUI data as well as access into it. Right, we have an identity management piece on top of it, which is called our Managed Access Gateway. All you do is log in through a browser, so it doesn't matter what you have in your commercial environment. We're not touching your commercial environment. This is like an add-on. All you need is a modern browser. You log in through a modern browser into Exostar, and from there you have the Managed Microsoft 365 piece, which requires 2FA to get in there. There's team management, there's user management. It is a Teams-based application up in Azure GCC High. So it is FedRAMP moderate equivalent. And that whole Managed Microsoft 365 piece covers 85 of those 110 NIST controls. So you can actually start with this piece, go into the Certification Assistant and say, Exostar manages this control. I can mark this as implemented. Say my CSP provides this. We'll even give you a shared responsibility matrix that says the snippets of how we satisfy each control. You copy that snippet from that PDF file right into Certification Assistant and say, okay, they manage it using this solution here. So that gives you the ability to store, collaborate, and manage your CUI documents there. It gives you the ability to actually invite users in there. So even if you have partners, they need to provide them data instead of emailing it to their non-compliant email server. You can actually invite them into the application to receive it there. Or we have a second feature in the Managed Microsoft 365 that allows you to send email out to a prime that has a commercial or not, that has a compliant type email server, or you can actually receive CUI directly to this Managed Microsoft 365, which is bypassing your commercial environment. That way you can receive CUI directly into there with no requirements on the prime side, where they don't require an Exostar license or a GCCI license to send you CUI into that environment. So these three pieces together, they are SaaS applications. This is going to be your document and your technology piece. But however, if you do need a third-party partner to help you through this process, as I mentioned before, in Certification Assistant, there is that partner that you can apply from there. Or within our bundle, if you purchase it through a bundle with us, we actually would hook you up with a partner. And what they would do is they would walk through Certification Assistant and Policy Pro with you, update those implementation statements for you, create the SSP plan for you, create any POA&Ms, give you guidance of how to close out those POA&Ms, and or give you additional services to close out those POA&Ms for you. But with that all together, we call that our CMMC Ready Suite, because if you purchase this full suite, you should get to 110. Once you're at 110, you are ready for that audit and get that certification that you require to work with your primes. All right, we appreciate you if you can enter any poll. Doe, can you send out that poll to everyone here? If you can, please submit or fill out that poll. We appreciate your feedback there. And now I'm going to go into some Q&A questions here. All right, number one, if our company wholly has owned subsidiaries in UK, Germany, and India, and I can include these in the assessment, as a lot of companies have global subsidiaries in friendly countries, it would be better to do an enterprise versus an enclave assessment. Well, you are more than welcome to include your whole UK, Germany, and all these guys into one assessment or one SSP plan. You just want to make sure you cover all your bases there. However, a lot of these companies, they actually only include the personnel and workstations and minimize the scope that is going to touch CUI. And so you are able to just reduce that scope, and you are able to include Germany, UK, and all that stuff into that one scope. What is the relationship between the SSP and the self-assessment? Well, the SSP is that plan, that systems security plan, right? You go through all the 110 controls there. And when you do the 110 controls, it's going to give you that score, but you are doing that on your own. You're doing your own self-assessment on that. You're creating that score on your own, right? When you do an audit, now that's no longer a self-assessment, because now they're going to audit you on how, if you did those controls correctly. And if you did those controls correctly, you can pass or fail. Right, during a self-assessment, all you do is do it on your own. You have that score. You enter into the SPRS system on your own. So you self-assessed your own self. You didn't have an auditor check to see if you did it properly. But you do have a partner. That's why we have the third-party partners. They do have the ability to do a readiness assessment, which will go through those controls with you. And since they could be C3PAOs or RPOs, they are well aware of what an auditor would ask, and make sure you are doing those controls properly, so that self-assessment is more accurate than if you did it on your own. If we already obtained my score by completing the NIST 800-171 and CMMC questionnaires in Exostar tools, and then input my assessment score into the SPRS system, what else do we need to complete in order to be fully compliant? So as you're going through that questionnaire, I don't know if that questionnaire you mean is if it's just questions versus doing the certification assistant, you do need to do that SSP plan, right? So if you do that whole NIST 800-171, the whole SSP plan, and you had that currently, if you had that score, and you can enter into the SPRS system, and that's all you need to do for now. When next year rolls around and CMMC 2.0 gets ratified and it's in play, it's in your contracts, and they're asking you to do an audit, now the next step would be to make sure you're at 110. You have to request an auditor to come in, do the audit, give you a pass or fail. Once you pass, you'll get that CMMC certification, and then you'll be fully compliant there. Is this requirement for subcontractors? This requirement could be for subcontractors if you are passing along CUI data onto them. Right? If you're working on a particular part and you need a specific diagram, or you have a specific diagram that you need the subcontractor to create for you, and it was originally noted as CUI, once you set it to the subcontractors, yes, they need to be CUI compliant. They need to fill out the SSP plan. They're going to have those DFARS flow downs to them. Now, if you're creating this circuit board and all you need is just, you know, like 10 parts of what we call our COTS, you know, off the shelf type parts, and they don't need to do anything with that. You're just ordering 10 pieces of it. That may not be required to be part of CUI. You can just order that on the side to that prime contractor, as that subcontract, as long as they don't know what it's for or who it's for, and you know, what other components for that circuit board you might be creating. 5, by what date do I need to have a C3PAO audit and certify us? As Kevin mentioned earlier, it will depend on what stage you're at. If your DFARS clauses are now, you know, requiring CMMC 2.0, then that's when you need to request for an audit. You know, but it could be a year from now, it could be 2 years from now, depending where you are in that state and if you're included to have an audit. We have a current SPRS score of 86 with a POA&M in place to be at 110 by December 1st, 2024. Yeah, absolutely. If you are fully 110 by December 2024, you are definitely okay, right? There are some people who are negative 100, and then still have a lot of work to do, and that takes time. But it looks like you're doing very well there. All right, here's some useful information. You can learn more about CUI on the Doc CUI mill page. You have your SPRS score. You can go to this one link here to learn more information about PIE and your SPRS material there. If you want to see a list of all our partners, we have a partners page there. However, we also have free trials available for Certification Assistant and Policy Pro, as well as the Managed Microsoft 365. We also have a trial for that as well if we wanted to. Actually, we should add that to the list here. But anyway, to start the trial, you can just go to this landing page and submit a trial. However, if you already are in Exostar, you could potentially go to the MAG Open Applications page and click on Certification Assistant there, and that would automatically start your trial there. For Policy Pro, you do have to go to the Policy Pro page, and from there you fill out the information to start your trial there. You'll get an email to start your trial, and then you can get into that. For Certification Assistant, I believe you have access to most of the stuff there. You just won't be able to print that SSP plan and some other things. For Policy Pro, the limitation there is I think they only give you templates for only the first family, or the first family, maybe access control. If you have any other questions, be sure to email us at sales@exostar.com or cmmc-team@exostar.com. Oh wow, I didn't realize we're kind of over a little bit. So thank you for joining. Hopefully you're able to fill that poll, and hopefully this was informative for you. Please reach out if you have any additional questions. Thank you, guys. Have a good one.